So I hope it appeals to the child and everyone. Thank you. My name is Tinkerbell. Maybe you've heard of me, maybe not. I'm the fairy from a story called Peter Pan. Surely you've heard of him. Peter Pan was the boy who did not want to grow up. We live in a magical place called Neverland, a place with fairies, mermaids, Indians, lost boys, and pirates. I don't like pirates, do you? They're mean, nasty folks, especially Captain Hook. But we will speak about pirates later. Now, I'd like everyone to get ready. Clap your hands 3 times for the story to begin. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. This is the story of Peter Pan told by Tinkerbell. Now, all children grow up except for one. You know his name, Peter Pan. Peter, as I said, lives in a magical place called Neverland, but sometimes he visits this world. Well, one night, he lost his shadow at John, Michael, and Wendy Darling's home, so he asked me to help him come and find it. I flew to the bedroom door, looked inside, the children were all asleep. Peter was right behind me, and he said, "Tink, do you know where they put my shadow?" "Oh, in the big box," I said, and I pointed to the dresser. So Peter flew over to the dresser, opened the drawer, and emptied all the contents on the floor. And he found his shadow, and do you know what he did? He locked me inside it. "Peter, let me out, let me out, let me out!" But he didn't hear me. Well, if Peter Pan ever thought at all, and I don't believe he ever thought, it was once he and his shadow were brought near each other, they would join like drops of water. And when they didn't, he was, well, you can imagine. He tried to stick it on the soap, and when that failed, he sat down on the floor, and he cried. Peter's tears woke up Wendy. She sat up in bed. "Boy, why are you crying?" Peter Pan rose, and he bowed to her, and she curtsied to him. "What's your name?" "Wendy Moira Angela Darling. What's your name?" "Peter Pan." "Is that all?" "Yes." "Well, where do you live?" "Do you know the answer to that?" "Second star to the right and straight on till morning." Well, Wendy thought this was strange, but even more odd was the fact that Peter had no mother. Oh my, Peter, no wonder you were crying. "Well, I wasn't crying because I don't have a mother. I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on." So Wendy took a needle and thread, and she sewed Peter Pan's shadow on so that it stayed. And he was so happy, he started to crow. You know the Peter Pan crows? Let's hear you crow like Peter Pan. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's hear a cock-a-doodle-doo. Ready? Silence! Cock-a-doodle-doo! And he began leaping around the room. He said, "How clever I am! Oh, the cleverness of me!" And Wendy looked at him and said, "Of course I did nothing." Well, Peter saw that she was upset, so he decided to tell her his story. "Wendy, I ran away the day I was born because I overheard my mother and father saying what would happen when I grow up. And I don't ever want to grow up. I want to stay a boy forever and always play games and have fun. So I went to live with the fairies." Well, Wendy loved this, and she said, "Oh, Peter, tell me everything you know about fairies." Well, the first time the first child laughed for the very first time, its laugh broke into 1,000 pieces, and they all went skipping about, and that was the beginning of fairies. So there ought to be fairies for one boy, a fairy for every boy and every girl. "Ought to be? You mean there aren't?" "No. Children know such a lot these days. They don't believe in fairies and magic. And every time someone says, 'I don't believe in fairies,' there's a fairy somewhere that drops down dead." Well, at this point, Peter remembered that he had locked me inside the drawer. So he went over, he opened it up, and I flew out in a fury. "Peter, how could you? How could you?" Well, I wasn't really angry at him. I was angry because Wendy liked Peter, and he was my Peter Pan. Even worse, she wanted me to be her fairy, and I was Peter Pan's fairy. Wendy kept asking girl questions. Where do we live? Well, we told her that before, So he went on to say that we live with the lost boys. They're the boys that fall out of their baby buggies when they're born. If they're not claimed in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days' time, they come to live with us in Neverland. Well, at this point, I should tell you a secret. There are no girls in Neverland. Did you know that? Not a one. No one to tell stories. It was agreed that Wendy would become our storyteller. That meant that she and her brothers John and Michael must accompany us to Neverland. It also meant that I had to help them to fly. So I sprinkled them with fairy dust, and up they rose into the air. Peter was the first to sail out the window. He said, "Follow me." And so we flew off into the night. Now I have to describe Neverland to you. It's a magical, beautiful place. It's a very green island in the midst of a wonderful sea. And there on that sea, bobbing up and down, was a pirate ship, the Jolly Roger. This is Captain Hook's ship. Well, as we flew over, Peter looked down and he said, "Hey, John, would you like an adventure? There's a pirate asleep in the tree below us." And John said, "Oh, how terribly ripping. Are there many pirates here on the island, Peter?" "Oh, yes, ever so many. That captain is Hook." "James Hook," said John. "Why, he's the worst of all." Little Michael began to cry because he knew Hook was so bad.
"What's he like, Peter? Is he very big?"
"Not so big as he was." "What do you mean, Peter?" "I mean I cut off his hand." "Oh, then he can't fight, can he?" "Oh, can't he just? He now has an iron hook and he claws with it." "Claws with it?" Well, Peter saw that John and Michael were getting a little bit nervous, so he decided to have a game with them. "I say, pretend you're a pirate. Say R like a pirate. Now you guys say it. Say R, everybody. 1, 2, 3. R. Good. Now say aye, aye, sir.
Aye, aye, sir.
That's how you address me," said Peter. "Now there's one thing that every boy who serves under me must swear, and so must you." John paled. "It's this. If we ever meet Hook in an open fight, that you leave him to me." "I swear, Peter."
"I swear too, Peter."
Now, I had been flying round and round them because they were slow and I was fast, when suddenly Wendy looked down and she saw that the pirates were aiming their gun at us, Long Tom, their big cannon. She said, "Oh, Peter, tell Tinkerbell to go away." But Peter refused. "Oh, then tell her to put a light out, please, Peter." "Well, she can't put a light out unless she's asleep." "Well, then tell her to go to sleep at once," John almost ordered. "She can't sleep unless she's sleepy." "Seems to me fairies can't do anything at all." Here I gave John a pinch, and not a loving one. Suddenly the air was filled with a tremendous crash. I was blown upwards high into the air with Wendy, and Peter was carried out by the wind to the sea. And John and Michael remained alone in the darkness, treading the air and floating. Well, a thought occurred to me at that moment, a bad thought. I'm usually a very good fairy, but Wendy liked my Peter Pan and I wanted to get her away from him, so I decided to lure her to her doom. I kept saying, "Follow me, Wendy dear, follow me." And so she followed me to her destruction. Now, when the heater is away, the island is always quiet. But on this particular night, the island came to life. The Lost Boys were looking for Peter. The pirates were looking for the Lost Boys. The Indians were looking for the pirates. And the beasts of the island, including the enormous crocodile, were also looking for the pirates. Now, the Lost Boys were thinking of their mothers. They could never think about their mothers when Peter was around, when suddenly a grim song filled the air. Yo ho, a pirate's life for me. You sing. Yo ho, a pirate's life for me. The Lost Boys got lost. They flung themselves down 7 holes in 7 trees, and these holes opened down into underground slides that led to Peter's home that was beneath the earth. Well, just at that moment, Captain Hook appeared in the clearing, along with his second-in-command, Shmee, and they saw the Lost Boys disappear down those holes. They had been seeking Peter's home for a very long time. Well, Smee decided to go after them, but Hook stopped him by placing his iron claw in his shirt collar. I want their captain, Peter Pan. 'Twas he that cut off my hand, he who cost her to a crocodile that happened to be passing by. It liked so much the taste of me that it's hungered for the rest of me ever since. If that croc had not swallowed a clock that goes tick-tock-tick, it would have caught me by now. I must have my revenge on Peter Pan, but how? Let me think. I have it! We'll cook a cake quite large, rich and thick, and we'll fill each layer of icing with poison. And then we'll place it near the lagoon where the boys swim. Since they have no mother to warn them of such a treat, the boys will gobble it down, and that'll be the end of the Lost Boys, cried Smee. It's the wickedest, prettiest plot I ever heard of. And he danced all around. Have you ever seen a pirate dance? It's pretty awful. Well, at that moment, suddenly, another sound filled the air. A sound of tick-tock, tick. The crocodile! Cried Captain Hook, and he ran off into the night, followed by Smee. Well, the Lost Boys climbed out of their hiding holes, and they began looking around. They saw the coast was clear, when suddenly Wendy flew overhead. And they looked up, and Nib said,
Look, fellas, I've seen a wonderful thing. It's a great white bird. I think it's a Wendy bird. It keeps saying, Wendy, and then, poor me. Well, I looked down and I said, Peter wants you to shoot the Wendy bird. And suddenly, Toodles, who is not too smart, took an arrow and shot Wendy, and she fell to the ground. Now at that point, Toodles saw his mistake. Oh no, this is not a bird, it's a lady. Peter must have been bringing her here to take care of us. Oh, what am I going to do? Suddenly, a sound filled the air. It was Peter crowing. I want to hear you guys crow this time. Somebody crow for me. Cock-a-doodle-doo! Am I the only one that crows around here? My goodness. Well, the boys knew it was Peter, and so they said, hide her. But it was too late. Peter leapt to the ground. Greetings, boys, I'm back. What? No cheer? The boys saluted, and then they were silent. Peter thought this was strange. He said, well, I brought you a mother. Still no sound from the boys, except for Toodles, who fell to his knees. Oh, Peter, I've killed her. Tink said you wanted to shoot her down, so I shot her down, and now look. And Wendy stirred at this moment. She said, I'm not dead, look. The arrow's stuck in my necklace. Well, then, the boys had to tell Peter of my crime. Never had I seen him look so stern. Tink, you are my friend no more. Be gone from me forever. I flew onto his shoulder and pleaded, Peter, Peter. But he brushed me off. Well, not forever, but for a whole week. So I flew over into the bushes, and I listened as Wendy told Peter and the boys stories. Well, days passed. There were many adventures that occurred. You remember that cake that the pirates baked? Well, they placed it at the lagoon, but because Wendy warned the boys about that, nobody touched it, and it soon grew hard as a rock. Then one night, Peter took it, and he fired it as a missile right onto the pirate ship, and it fell on the deck, and guess what? Hook tripped over it. Another night, we had a beautiful time swimming at Mermaid Lagoon. Now the boys became tired, so they climbed back out onto the rocks to sleep, and I kept watch for the pirates. Well, it wasn't long before I saw a pirate dinghy, that's a small ship, approach. And so I decided to warn Peter, Peter, wake up, it's pirates. Peter leapt to his feet and he called, Pirates, everyone dive. And so there was a flash of legs, and everyone was hidden underneath the water. Now, in the pirate ship were two pirates, Smee and Starkey, and also the Indian princess Tiger Lily, and her hands and feet were bound together by rope. She had tried to climb onto the Jolly Roger pirate ship, and she had been captured because she was trying to get to Captain Hook. So they were going to do something terrible to her. Now, Peter, who was treading the water nearby, decided he would have to do something to save Tiger Lily, so he decided to make his voice sound just like Captain Hook.
He said, "Hello there, ahoy, you lovers."
"Why, it's the captain," said Shmee. "We're putting the princess out on the rock, Captain, just as you ordered."
"Set her free," said Peter, trying not to laugh.
"Well, but why, Captain?"
"Do as I say or I'll plunge my hook into you."
All right, all right, all right."
So they cut Tiger Lily's bonds, and she slid away into the water and disappeared.
Now at that moment, the real Captain Hook swam up to the boat.
And so Shmee and Starkey lifted him on, and he said,
"Is there something wrong, Captain?"
and Captain Hook said, "Oh, our boys have found themselves a mother."
"Oh, evil day," said Starkey.
"What's a mother?" said Shmee. "Someone to look after them. Oh, that means she's in league with Peter Pan. What is to be done? What is to be done? What is to be done? Let me think, let me think, let me think. I have it. We will seize the boys, force them to walk the plank, and keep the Wendy for our mother. Now, where is Princess Tiger Lily?"
"Oh, we let her go, Captain, just as you ordered."
"What? I gave no such order. Unless there's someone here pretending to be me. Perhaps a spirit. Spirit that haunts this dark lagoon tonight. Dost hear me?" And Peter, who was still bobbing in the water, said, "Obs, bobs, hammer and tongs, I hear you. What is your name, spirit? Speak." "I am James T. Hook, captain of the Jolly Roger," said Peter, trying not to laugh. "You are not. Say that again and I'll plunge my anchor into you," said Peter, laughing his head off. "Well, if you are Hook, then who am I?" "A codfish," said Peter. "A codfish?" said Hook blankly. "Oh, evil day," said Starkey. "We've been captain all this time by a codfish," said Smee. "Quiet. Let me think here. Something is not right. Have you another voice, spirit? Tell me that." And Peter, who could never resist a game, said, "Yes," answering in his own voice. "Another name?"
"Aye, aye."
"Is it vegetable?" "No." "Mineral?" "No." "Animal?" "No." "Is it a man?" "No." "Is it a boy?"
"Yes."
"Ordinary boy?" "No." "Wonderful boy?"
"Yes."
"Is it Peter Pan?" "Yes." "Into the water, Shmee and Starkey, take him dead or alive."
"To it, boys."
And from around the lagoon you heard,
"Aye, aye."
and the fighting began. It was short, it was sharp. John was the first to draw blood.
Peter scaled the rock from one side and Hook from the other. Neither knew that the other was coming, but each feeling for a grip met the other's hand. They looked up. They saw they were inches away from each other, and at that point, Peter tore the dagger from Hook's belt and made ready to drive it home, when suddenly he realized he was higher up on the rock than his foe. It would not be a fair fight, so he offered Hook his hand. Do you know what Hook did? He bit Peter. Peter stood there dazed, not just from the pain, but because of the unfairness of the act, while Hook took his iron claw and raked it once, twice across Peter, made ready for the third and fatal time, when suddenly, tick-tock, tick was heard.
"The crocodile," said the captain, and he dove into the water and swam like mad for the ship, followed by the crocodile in fast pursuit. Now Peter was left alone. All the lost boys had already fled. He was there in the lagoon. He hoisted Wendy onto the rock, and he was wounded. He was bleeding. He knew he could not fly to save them, and the water was rising higher and higher. The tide was coming in. He looked around. What could he do? He saw a kite that Michael had been flying earlier that night. So he took and wrapped the tail around Wendy. Wendy said, "No, Peter, we ought to draw lots. It can't live too." He said, "And you a lady? Never." And so he hoisted her up and lifted her off, and she drifted out of sight. Now Peter was left alone, and the water was rising higher and higher. It was up to his chin.
"It'll be quite an adventure to die," he said. But Peter did not die. I would like to say that I saved him, but it was the Neverbird, a great big bird that lives in Neverland, that carried him home.
Well, one of the important things that happened after the rush of the lagoon
Was that it made the Indians our friends, because we had saved Princess Tiger Lily. Another thing that happened, and I shudder to think of it, was that John, Michael, and Wendy decided to go home to their parents. Peter was not happy about this, so he refused to accompany them. The Lost Boys decided to escort them off the island. But at that moment, as they were emerging from their hiding holes, the pirates struck. They took each boy, flung them to Shmee, who flung him to Starkey, until he fell at the feet of Captain Hook, where he was bound and tied so he could not fly. Well, Wendy was treated differently. Hook offered his arm to her, escorted her back to the ship. Then he crept back to Peter's home and slid down the largest of the holes, and though he was a very thin pirate, it was a tight fit. He squirmed his way all the way down to the bottom, and then he fell on the floor, and he looked around, and he saw that Peter was asleep on his cot, and next to Peter was a cup of medicine that he'd been using to heal his wounds from the clawing. Now, Hook had about him a yellow death-dealing drug, a poison that he kept in his ring. So he crept over to the cup, poured the poison inside it, then made his way back to the hole, wormed his way back up the slide until he emerged out the top, and he looked the very epitome of evil rising from its tomb. Now, Peter remained asleep throughout this until I began pounding at his door. "Peter, let me in, let me in, let me in, you silly—" "What is it?" he said, opening the door. "Oh, you never would guess," I said, offering him 3 guesses. "Out with it, Tink." Well, then I told him that Wendy and the Lost Boys had been kidnapped, and the Lost Boys were going to be forced to walk the plank. "Well, I'll rescue them," said Peter, and as he looked about for his weapons, he saw the cup of medicine. He could take the medicine to make Wendy happy. So he walked over to it, and suddenly I said, "No, Peter." "Oh, why, what's the matter?" "It's poison." "What do you mean it's poison?" "Oh, Hook poisoned it." "Well, don't be ridiculous. Hook can't get down here. He's too big. Besides, I never went to sleep." And so he went to drink the poison with one of my lightning moves. I drank it instead. "Tink, how dare you drink my medicine?" I did not answer. I was already reeling in the air. "Tink, what's the matter with you?" "It was poison, Peter, and now I'm going to be dead." "What? Tink, did you drink that to save me?" "Yes." "But why?" "You silly ass," I said, lighting on his shoulder. I felt Peter start to cry. Touched his tears on my finger. He was afraid that my light was going to go out. So I said, "Peter, I think I could get better again if children believed in fairies." So Peter called to children all over the world, this world and the next. "Do you believe in fairies? Do you believe in fairies? If you believe in fairies, clap your hands. Go ahead, clap." "Oh, save Tink, that's it." And I grew better. First, I felt my voice grow strong and my wings could carry me again, and I was soon buzzing around the room as happy as ever. "Now to rescue Wendy," said Peter. And he found his weapons, and then he emerged from that hole, and the moon was riding high in a cloudy sky. And he was ready to set about his perilous quest. Well, back on the Jolly Roger pirate ship, the pirates were having a grand old time celebrating. Some of them were drinking, some of them were gambling and playing cards, while Hook paced the deck. He was not altogether happy. Suddenly there were no more battles to be won. Better for Hook to have less ambition, to think that no children love me. What is to be done? What is to be done? What is to be done? Let me think. And then he realized
he had a whole ship full of boys down below him. He could set them free. That would endear him in their hearts forevermore. But then Hook also remembered he was the greatest villain of all time. If he set them free, that would hardly serve his purpose. And so he said, "Are the boys chained so they cannot fly?" Shmi said, "Aye, aye, sir." "Then hoist them up." So the boys were brought before Hook and ranged in a line as the plank was being prepared for them to walk. At the same time he said, "Bring me their mother." So Wendy was brought before Hook. "So, my beauty, you're about to watch your children walk the plank. Have you any final words for them?" "Are they really going to die?" she asked. "Why, yes." "Well then, these are my final words. I hope you all die like proper English gentlemen, not like sniveling, nasty, ugly pirates." "Tie her up!" cried Hook, and Wendy was taken by Shmi and tied to the mast. Now, he intended to force Wendy to watch each boy walk the plank, but before he could do so, the sound of tick-tock, tick filled the air, and he said, "The crocodile!" And so he fell to his knees with his eyes closed, and all the pirates formed a ring around them with their eyes closed too. Well, the lost boys looked around. They didn't see any crocodile, but they did see their captain, Peter Pan. Peter flew in, and he found the key and set all the boys free. Then he took his sword and he cut Wendy's ropes. It would have been the easiest thing for him to fly away with them, but instead an oath filled his lips. "It's Hook or me." Hook looked up and he said, "Who's that?" "Peter Pan the Avenger." And then he cried out, "To them, boys!" And so the fighting began. Now, the Indians, the pirates would have won if they had kept it together, but they kept chasing the lost boys from one side of the ship to the other, so that the ship pitched backwards and forwards. Sometimes you had pirates falling off this side, sometimes they fell off this side, until finally the last pirate was Captain Hook, and he came face to face with Peter Pan. "So, Pan, there is no crocodile on board. It was you all along." "Yes, it was me." "Proud and insolent youth, prepare to meet your doom," he said, raising his sword. "Dark and sinister man, have at thee." And so they began their sword fight all across the ship, weaving in and out of the lost boys. Peter was a superb swordman, but his short reach kept him from driving the blade home. Finally, Hook raised his iron claw, ready to claw Peter, when suddenly Peter dove underneath his arm and stabbed him in the ribs. Instantly, the sword dropped from Hook's hand. "Pan, what art thou?" "I am a youth! I am a joy!" he cried, lifting his arm. And then Hook raised his hook one more time, ready to stab Peter in the throat. But Peter was suddenly up in the air, flying above, fighting him so fast, fast as the wind. Hook could not keep up. So he raced for the gunpowder magazine, and he set it on fire. Now he emerged and he said, "Pan, prepare to meet your doom. The ship will soon blow up in 2 minutes' time." With that, he raced to the edge of the ship and he threw himself over into the ocean. And guess what? The sound of tick-tock, tick filled the air. And that was the crocodile. And so perished James T. Hook. Peter Pan became the captain of Neverland. And later that night, he decided to escort John, Michael, and Wendy Darling home to their parents. And the parents were so happy to receive them that they also adopted the lost boys and even Peter. But as you know, Peter would never leave Neverland. So he remains here until this day, and I am always at his side because there are so many adventures to explore. Perhaps one night we'll come and visit you at your home. Would you let us in if we came to your window and said hello? I hope so. Well, thank you for coming out to hear the story of Peter Pan. I hope you all have a magical new year. Thank you very much. Thank you for being a lovely audience. Just to let you know, I'm not only an actress, but I'm also an author. and if you're interested, I have some of my books over here. I have one that is actually takes place in Canfield, and it's about angels. It's for young adults. And then I have one that's for adults. It's about a fairy queen as well. So thank you again. Oh, and I also have my theater cards right there on that table in case you're interested in seeing those as well. So thank you, and enjoy your night.